Hello, I'm the 10-minute English teacher. Let's get you exam ready. Today we're thinking about Romeo and Juliet, and I'm going to be providing a guide to the characters. So, here are the characters from the play. On the left-hand side, we've got the Montague family, and on the right-hand side, we've got the Capulets. From the Montagues, we've got Montague and Lady Capulet, and they are parents to Romeo. Romeo has got a cousin called Benvolio, and they're with blue around him because he's not really a Montague, but is just closely aligned with Romeo. We've got Mercutio, his friend. Romeo has a life outside of his family, so he's got some friends, albeit Benvolio is his cousin. And we've also got Friar Lawrence, not a Montague, but closely aligned with Romeo. Friar Lawrence doesn't have any children of his own, and he treats Romeo like a son. On the right-hand side, we've got the Capulets. We've got Lady Capulet and Capulet, or Lord Capulet as he's known when we first meet him in the play. Same goes for Montague on the other side. They are the parents to Juliet. And Juliet, just like Romeo with Benvolio, she's got a cousin that she has a close relationship with, Tybalt. And Juliet has an adult who is also not quite a Capulet, but she works for the Capulet family. That's the nurse, and she has cared for Juliet throughout her life and is closely aligned to her. The nurse doesn't have any children of her own, much like Friar Lawrence. So these families are very, very similar to each other, and the experiences that Romeo and Juliet have had are also quite similar. I'm going to take you through the characters now and talk to you about each one of the major characters in the play. We start with Romeo. He's a lovesick youth who has no interest in the feud between his family and the Montagues. The Montagues and the Capulets hate each other, and there's been lots of conflict and lots of fighting in the streets between them, not something that Romeo is interested in. When we first meet him, he's pining for a girl called Rosaline, who is forgotten the very moment he meets Juliet. Shakespeare associates him with the motif of fire in the play. He's a passionate and loving character, but he's also quite impulsive and acts without thinking. Then we've got Juliet. As her father knows, she is a stranger in the world and has a lot to learn. As a representation of a wealthy Elizabethan girl, she would have had no social life beyond the walls of her home. Girls in that period didn't go to school, wouldn't have necessarily had the same influence socially that the boys did have, and certainly that's something that's reflected in the relationship between her and her father. He's very much in charge of all the family affairs. She meets Romeo by chance, and her life's direction changes, and you can see her as both loving and poetic and misunderstood, but you can also see her as ignorant and disrespectful towards her parents. Capulet now, Juliet's father, and he's very loving and plans her future with someone called Paris. We see him in the play as being a caring and reasonable father, doing as fathers were expected to at the time as he plans her wedding and her future. But we can also view him as a controlling tyrant. So remembering there's always two ways that we can view the characters, two different opinions that we can have of them is important when it comes to thinking about Shakespeare's plays. Montague is the father of Romeo, and he only really turns up a couple of times in the play. At the beginning, he asks Benvolio to find out what the matter is with his depressed son. Doesn't ask him himself. He hasn't got that close relationship with Romeo, but he does worry about him and deeply cares about him. So he sends Benvolio, his nephew, off to find out what the matter is. And then he turns up at the end when Romeo and Juliet lie dead. He loves Romeo, but doesn't seem to have that close relationship with him that would certainly benefit the both of them in the end. We've got Lady Capulet and Lady Montague. Being Elizabethan England, the wives and mothers are spectators and the fathers are responsible for controlling the affairs of their children. So Romeo and Juliet's mothers play a smaller role than the fathers do in the play. Lady Capulet's job in the play is to relay Capulet's plans for her future to Juliet, and they've got a formal relationship, and Juliet calls her Madam. Juliet's got a much closer relationship with the nurse. Romeo has a friend, his name's Mercutio. And Romeo's got a friend because Elizabethan boys were allowed a life outside of the family, so Romeo's been able to make a friend there. Mercutio is confident but doesn't like Romeo having a life beyond their friendship and wonders where Romeo is all the time when he's off secretly wooing and marrying Juliet. He's a proud character and doesn't back down when challenged. We've got Friar Lawrence, who is somebody who's very supportive of Romeo and not having had a child of his own, almost treats Romeo like his own son because he's had a life of celibacy because he's a friar. And he makes plans for Romeo that he hasn't really got any right to. You'll have seen the films, the likelihood is you'll have seen those. And if you have, he's often shown to be this really sensitive and caring character, and they tend to overlook the fact that his plans are nothing short of ridiculous. He is fraught with calamity, and everything that he plans goes wrong. So he's also quite a fickle character in many ways, and that's often overlooked. We've got the nurse, and if you were a rich Elizabethan mother like Lady Capulet, you could afford the luxury of having someone to mind and nurse, which means breastfeed, your children. So the nurse, whose child died in infancy, is somebody who works for the Capulets, and she's raised Juliet almost as if she was her own, and she plans Juliet's future as if she was the mother, which has dreadful consequences. The cousins of Romeo and Juliet are Tybalt and Benvolio. Tybalt is Juliet's cousin, Benvolio is Romeo's cousin. And Juliet's cousin Tybalt is proud and hateful, which is pretty much the opposite of Romeo's cousin Benvolio, who's very much a peacekeeper in the play. There are some others to think about. So we've got the prince, and in Verona, the prince is responsible for lawmaking, and he's the one who is responsible for dishing out punishments in the play. We've got Balthazar, who is a character with a ridiculous name, who it turns up later on when he is meant to... He doesn't realise that Juliet is not dead and accidentally tells Romeo she is. That's the function that he plays. We've got the apothecary, which is a creepy little man that sells Romeo some poison. And we've got somebody called Peter, who turns up for a short moment with the nurse. The nurse, when she speaks to Romeo, brings somebody called Peter along just to make her look high status, which is quite interesting because actually that doesn't quite work out the way she had hoped it would do. And Romeo ends up giving her some money for her troubles. So there are lots of other characters, but you don't need to get bogged down in that and worry too much. The thing to remember is that some characters are named in the plays of Shakespeare and play very small blink and you'll miss them roles. Your teacher probably can't name every character in order of appearance in Romeo and Juliet. So be confident and don't worry too much. So here are, again, those characters. So those are the characters that are involved in all the major moments of the play. Definitely worth knowing and definitely worth understanding that most characters have got a counterpart that's associated with them on the other side in the other family. So there we are, the characters of Romeo and Juliet. If you want to take your revision further, here's a few things you can do. Can you name all the major characters in the play without looking? If you can't, feel free to revisit, use the play bar, have a little look back and refamiliarise yourself with those. Can you explain something significant for each character in the play? Make yourself a flashcard and think about that. And you might like to research what roles the less significant characters in the play have. Who's not been mentioned in this short introduction to the characters in Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Okay, check out the other videos on my channel. I'll continue to add content and feel free to ask for something you'd like to see me cover in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share and keep revising.